See if we got uploaded.
Yep, I see it. We are live. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's live stream. Today's topic is AWS services, an intro to AWS cloud architecture. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam. I'm the director of marketing here at Cloud Institute. And if you're not familiar with Cloud Institute, we are a training and coaching company that equips IT teams to confidently deliver on IT projects. We offer personalized coaching with cloud experts and hands-on project-based training to help you with your live projects. And I am pleased today, speaking of our experts, I want to introduce you to Faisal Khwaja, or FK as we call him. He's the CTO of Cloud Institute and will be presenting today. He's experienced in leading IT teams in the areas of development, infrastructure, and DevOps. And he's moved Cloud Institute and its sister companies at the EdTech Ventures level from on-prem to the AWS cloud platform and played a key role in the architecture of that AWS platform. FK, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm really glad to join here.
Yeah, and before I turn it over to you real quick, I want to encourage everyone to ask questions in the comments, and we'll answer them throughout the presentation. Also, this recording will be available here on this LinkedIn event page immediately afterwards and in perpetuity. So we'll try to keep this to just under an hour. So without further ado, FK, take it away.
All right. Can you share the slides, please? The PowerPoint. Perfect.
Yeah,
all right. Go to the first one. Let me just go. Okay, I got control over it. All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you guys may be. So my name is Faisal Khwaja, and again, also can go by FK, my first and last initial. I am AWS Solution Architect, certified. I have PMP and TOGAF. For most of you guys who may not know TOGAF, that's an open source architecture framework. Highly recommend if you guys are getting into the architecture area, then you should probably look into it. It's a very dry yet very valuable subject and certification that you can probably have in the architecture space. And of course, I am a seasoned Java software developer as well, so keeping myself hands-on when it comes to development and coding. All right, I've been working in the cloud space for almost 4.5, 5 years. Before that, I've been actually doing architecture work just on the on-premise environments. And then as soon as cloud started taking off, and then I started looking into it, then I saw the value. Immediately, I jumped over to the cloud while we're architecting my application on the cloud and using and taking advantage of all the services that we will be talking today, and also the ease of use and manageability from the AWS or any vendor for that perspective that basically give you that flexibility. Also try to work on different Python and PHP libraries when it comes to AI and machine learning. Okay, enough about me. Let's jump right in. So the agenda for today is talk about the cloud basics, right? In general, the agnostic of which a cloud platform vendor we are talking about. Want to touch base on the needs of the cloud and why would one think when they want to migrate from on-premise to cloud? What are the gotchas, the pitfalls, what you should think about? So we'll talk a little bit about the cloud basic. Of course, it's only a 60-minute session, so we'll try to capture and cover as much as we can. And then also, I would like to get into the services from AWS perspective. These services are kind of a common across all vendors. So if you go to AWS, from AWS to Azure to Google Cloud or Alibaba is kind of coming up now pretty fast. So you will see the service name may probably differ. The configuration, the dashboard might be different. But if you go try to compare service to service across these vendors, you'll obviously find these services available in all these vendors. However, AWS is kind of ahead in the game. And the last one is the case study. So I'll present the architecture that we have implemented, a very basically, not the full extent of the architecture which we have implemented here at Cloud Institute, but at least, give you a little gist of it, just the flavor of what we have implemented. So I've kind of taken out an example of my architecture that we have implemented here at Cloud as a case study, and we can walk through that real quick at the end of the presentation. One thing that I did not include here is after we are done with this, simple 8-10 slide show, then I will actually jump over to AWS account, Cloud Institute account, and there I would like to actually walk you guys through. Setting up an EC2 instance real time and maybe accessing it. Also setting up a bucket. That's the second service, which is commonly used, and also maybe just about IAM roles, which is heavily, and it's a pillar of any AWS or any cloud provider. So I'll try to touch base these three major and high level services along the way, real time, and I'll walk you through while I share my screen. Okay, and as Peter suggested, do type in the questions on the chat, and then Peter will ask those questions at the end, and then I'll try to answer those. All right, there we go. Okay, let me just, Peter, you can see the slideshow, right? It says, what is cloud platform?
Yep, we can see it there.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure that we can. All right. So what is really a cloud platform, right? So a cloud platform, it basically takes some responsibility on itself, right? The cloud provider, and it does leave some responsibility to the customer, right? And we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth in the next maybe slide. You can think of the cloud platform as the data center on the fly, right? Which means that a lot of things that people on the call who have actually experienced the on-premise data centers, right? Or if you have not, then the one thing that you have to think about is the costing of a data center, and also the amortization of those boxes that if you acquire, you purchase, you procure, and then host it on your on-premise. Either it could be your own facility or maybe a data center. So when you are actually thinking of that, then you have to think of the amortization, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Sometimes the issues with these planning is that they may probably go under, or sometimes they go over. So meaning that you as a project manager or a CTO, you can say, hey, I need 5 ESXi services. I think there's a 1 second. Sorry, I don't know why this is coming up. Oops. Okay. All right. So you may probably say, I need 5 boxes of ESXi servers, and you may probably say, okay, the run rate at which we will grow is XY, and then if that run rate does not meet, then those boxes or ESXi servers then basically just sit there idle and then doing nothing, right? So that's the overrun of the cost that you actually have to bear as a technologist, right? Or it could be that you procure some machines that thinking, okay, that's going to be a steady growth of users on your systems. However, your platform takes off, your application takes off, and your platform remains behind, which means that you are basically under. In that case, you have a big problem from the sales and marketing side as well. So that kind of a problem is alleviated when we talk about the cloud. Why? Because it is a data center on the fly, meaning that you can actually go ahead and start creating your environment. You can procure those environment on the fly by just a click of a few buttons, right? And we will see this at the end of this presentation. The other thing is that a shared and dedicated resources on a common hosting platform. So many folks who have actually worked in maybe mainframe. I haven't worked on mainframe too much, but it's, if you go back in 60s and whatnot, people were very used to and attuned to mainframes where they were actually just allocating resources using the mainframe. So similar concept has been actually reintroduced in the cloud, but with the virtualization of the machines, I think that this has actually taken to the next level, and that's why the popularity of the cloud has gone through the roof and then exponentially growth. So within the shared and dedicated resources, you will be sharing CPU, memory, and disk storage. However, one concern that people have asked me about the disk storage, because when you allocate a shared resource, disk storage, then then what we need to do is we want to make sure that the data is wiped out completely. So from at least AWS perspective, the time I've spent in AWS and the research I've done from the compliance perspective, all the data that is written on the hard disk, hard drives, and then once you actually let go of that hard disk, then they actually wipe it out through their compliance software, which is PCI compliant, to make sure that none of the data has been left as a residual on those hard disks and hard drives, right? Even though it says shared, but then once the next person gets it, it's all clean and you don't have to worry about it. The cloud, basically, this is something that everybody, when they're actually using. Let me click this. When people are using the cloud infrastructure, then they have to share CPU, memory, and disk storage, and then they actually, once they are done with that, then it goes to the next customer. Cloud, however, takes care of the services that can be easily managed within their realm. For example, the physical security of the environment, right? So if you go and take a look at just online, the security that is placed around these data centers that AWS hosts, the regions and availability zones, they are called. They are very secure, and you have to have a permit in order to get into those buildings. And those even temporary permits are very time bound, and then they basically expire. So the physical security is there, and then the other thing is that they have actually built those availability zones / region in such a way that, if there's the power outage in one area, one region, then the other region or availability zone may not be impacted because they are coming from different grids, power grids. So AWS has thought through that. They have also tried to build those availability zone and regions in a less probable flooding zones, right? So those are the things that sometimes we take for granted, but AWS has really put in a lot of thoughts around it in terms of making sure that the physical security is there, the backup on the power is there, the flooding risk is minimized. Obviously, there were a few downtimes within AWS. If you go and research, then you'll see some downtimes, and so nothing is 100% available 100% of the time. As AWS CTO himself has said it, that if you think that something is not going to go down, then basically, you're living in a fool's paradise. So something may bound to go down sometime, but the probability and the percentage of that is minimized and minimal when you're actually hosting on AWS. Security patches, that is also AWS's responsibility. So you don't have to worry about the latest patch on, it could be Linux box, or it could be on the Microsoft machine, MySQL. They are constantly on top of security patches that they apply on these, not just the operating system level, but also at the services level. Like I said, for example, MySQL or MS SQL and the likes. All right, let me just go to the next slide. So again, continuing with the same, what is a cloud platform? So it is a ready-made service for lift and shift, right? So I have talked about some of the database availability on AWS, and I'm 100% sure that it would be available on the other vendors like Alibaba, for example, or GCP or Azure, right? So these guys would have the similar services available on their platform as well. MySQL, MS SQL, Oracle, Postgres. So when you are on AWS, they do have different flavors of MySQL. For example, MariaDB is another one that they have actually introduced, which has a replica and all the other whistles and bells that are needed in terms of making sure that you have a master and slave concept, and you also are replicating for read-only replicas where the data can be read from those other databases. This way, the actual production write-only database is not really bogged down when you have hefty queries that are being run on. So the other things are basically data warehouse. AWS has Redshift, which basically is a columnar data warehouse. Very powerful, very robust, and it can scale very, very quickly. So that's a data warehouse that they offer. Now, firewalls are basically they have applied it very, very smartly in terms of security groups and access control list. So you can have a what they call it, VPC, virtual private cloud, and within that you can apply a subnet, and then you can have subnet security. You can have at the VPC level security. Once you start looking and getting your hands dirty in terms of setting up the security groups, that you will understand the granularity that you can get into when you are trying to secure your environment, right? The other thing that it's not mentioned over here, and I would highly recommend, is a look at multi-account concept within AWS. That's another that has been recently introduced, and what this allows is give you another level of security. I personally think is because let's say if you have a development environment and a production environment, right, and a QA environment, you can separate those accounts using separate account access, right? So you can have production account environment, then you can have QA account environment, then you can have development account environment. Even if you have the accounting, then you can probably go further and divide it. So look into multi-account environment as well within AWS, and through that you can apply security. So the production environment access is limited to just a very limited handful of folks. And it also has the 2MFA, so multi-factor authentication. It could be, your phone, email address, whatever. So all of the security, the firewalls are through the software, just through button clicks. You don't really need any physical firewalls, boxes installed. So that has made your security paramount, and also very easy to manage. There's a DNS server, so if you are hosting something on GoDaddy, you can easily migrate over to Route 53. I recently just launched a site, and then for that I just went through Route 53, and then registered the domain there. You can easily validate if you're using some email exchange server and whatnot through the same Route 53. So the DNS, the hosted zones, are already dedicated on Route 53. So again, everything is kind of on one single platform, and you don't have to leave AWS or whatever the platform you're using. Active Directory. So if you want to authenticate something on your server, which is basically hosted either on your physical location or your on-premise, then you can easily authenticate those users, and then there's an easy way of connectivity through the forest or non-forest environment. Auditing, that's a very very cool feature, and a lot of people use that auditing feature. So this allows you to make sure that anything and everything that is happening through the API service when you're using AWS, it gets logged into the system. The basic audit trails are available at no cost, but if you want to actually get a little bit more granular, then you have to make sure then you can pay an extra amount and then get it logged for extended period of time, and then you can export them out into S3 buckets. Middle tier services, this is my favorite, the SQS service. So anybody who has worked on a queuing service would appreciate the power of queuing. What queuing allows you is to create a message, and you can be subscribed to that the queue, and you can just pull that from the queue and then start consuming that queue on your end as a consumer. So it's a producer and consumer concept. This allows you to actually detach a monolithic application into a very, very SOA based architecture. If you guys don't know SOA architecture, SOA is basically, what it allows you is separate out the responsibility into small modules, right? So you can have, for example, if there is a payment whole big module that you want to build, you can break out the payment modules into separate. For example, taking order, that could be a separate module. Validating the credit card might be a separate smaller module, and then maybe actually processing might be different. So these three can be actually hosted as a services on your SQS, and then they can actually consume. Anybody can consume those services when the order is placed on the SQS. So that's a really powerful service that at least AWS offers, but again, all the other vendors do provide that same SQS service as well. Deployment tools, you should look into Beanstalk and OpsWorks. They are basically allows you to run multiple environments. If you are actually storing or hosting, let's say, a development environment, then you can easily use Beanstalks in order to deploy, blue-green environment, and then have some traffic go into one route, the other one can go to the other route. So they do have a really nice way of the deployments and the hosting of multi versions of your environment, and then you can track the traffic going into each environment. So sort of like a A/B testing. And again, there are many tools available, but AWS has all that integrated into their environment as well. So what really cloud is, the best analogy that I could come up with was it's sort of a Walmart, right? So, and the reason I say a cloud is a Walmart is because just like you walk into a Walmart, then you can pick and choose what you need. You got the variety of things, and even for one single product, if you want to buy an apple, so right, so you can just say, okay, which apple do you want to buy? Oranges, whatever, right? So you can pick and choose your requirement. You can pick and choose based on your requirement, and you can put it on your bucket and then actually check out. So in a similar fashion on the cloud, regardless of which cloud provider you're using, they all come with the same concept, right? So services are available. Every service is available to you with its own configuration, right? And with its own size, so you can say, and then the time that you want to run those services, and then you choose, okay, I want, for example, a T2 micro EC2 instance, which is a virtual machine, because my load would be very minimal to begin with. So if you are a startup company or you want to do some R&D, for example, then you go and then check out a EC2 instance with a T2 micro instance, and then you just host your application on that platform. So the cost would be very minimal. Now, assume the 6 months later, your traffic is growing. Now you want to bump up your EC2 instance. So from T2 micro, you may want to go to M series. And then again, they have a variety of different services, depending on whether you are using for image processing or heavy memory consumption applications. So they have heavy disk IO based applications, right? So they all are readily available for you. All you have to do is select from the available options of EC2 instances, and then you also configure saying, okay, I want this much memory, this much hard disk, this type of hard disk, GCP, 10 gigabytes throughput, or whatever it is, right? So it allows you to pick and choose what exactly you need, right? And then at the end, when you are actually checking out, it would kind of give you a little idea through the calculator that how much it's going to cost. If you want to use the calculator, you can see it, how much the cost is going to be, and so there are no surprises at the end of the month. The other thing is, once you are done with those, then you can just turn them off, right? So you can use those services based on the time and the need of your business requirement. And once you're done, you can easily terminate those instances. Then I will walk you through how to, for example, turn on and off an EC2 instance. And we do that, by the way, right? At Cloud Institute, we have a QA environment, for example, right? And we have 5 or 10 QA instances at any given time between that range. Whenever the QA folks or the development or the demo is happening, then during that time frame, we turn on those services. Once they are done, we just simply pause them, right? So we don't really terminate them. So we just pause them or stop them. And so that in case if tomorrow, day after tomorrow, we want to restart that again, then we can easily re-engage those servers back again. So there are certain a downside to it, meaning that you may probably lose the IP and the actual IP to that box, but at least your cost is not as high as it would be if you continue to run those services. So again, the concept is you pick your services, pick the size of the services that you want, and then you basically bring them into the environment and you start using them. Once you're done, you can easily turn them off, terminate them, or pause them until you need them again. And I don't know, every week, every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I mean, these new services are coming in, right? So you have to stay on top of what new services are available. Sometimes existing services are being updated with new feature set, new configuration, and whatnot. And sometimes new services are being brought in, right? Recognized with an AI space is a new service that Amazon AWS has introduced just maybe a year, 2 years back. I'm using heavily transcribe service, right? So transcribe, basically what it does is just like I'm doing a video right now, and then I can go ahead and transcribe this into in a text format. So in case if somebody wants to kind of just read through it, especially if if there's they want to do some searches on my video, they don't really have to listen in through the entire 1 hour. They can probably just quickly do a search and they can tell you exactly where I talked about, for example, S3 bucket, right? So the transcription comes handy right there. So the other use case I'm using transcribe is basically using it for multilingual training, right? So if I'm not a native Spanish speaker, but the need is for this whole course or content or your application or whatever it is that needs to be transcribed into a different language, then you can use those services within AWS. So again, you use that service, you pay for the amount that you used it, and then you basically stop using it, and then you don't get billed. AWS also has a nice billing feature, a consolidated billing, and as well as a daily billing cycle. So you can see what the trend looks like when it comes to billing. You can see, and it also had projections saying, okay, by the end of the month, this would be your bill based on the usage. So I can show you that at the end of the presentation as well. Okay, this is very critical slide, right? So guys, a lot of folks would just jump on and say, hey, it's really cool. Let's use a cloud, right? And cloud is going to solve all of our problems, right? Not really, right? So a cloud may be really cool, really easy to use. You can actually turn on and off services. You can up the cost, bring down the cost, whatnot. But it is a little too much power in our hands in terms of what services you want to bring up and start using it. So the one thing that I'd like to stress, if you guys are thinking to migrate to cloud, you may want to probably think of the ease of usability, the speed to market, right? But don't think this is going to be a cost saver, right? You'd have to figure out, okay, what my cost is today, right? And then look at using the calculator, which I have actually just an example. I have shown it as a S3 calculator. You can use this, but you can also use the calculator for every other service as well. So before you migrate, you want to maybe do your homework, right? You say, okay, first of all, I need the back, and this is very, very critical. You want to make sure when you are thinking of migrating to any cloud, regardless, AWS, Google, or whatever, you want to make sure that you are thinking through in terms of the agility that that's a non-tangible cost saving that you will have, right? Quick to turn around to market, right? ROI perspective. So those are the good non-tangible items. Eventually, those ROI may probably turn into tangible dollar value for you. But those are the things that you have to probably think. The one thing that again, this is Amazon's AWS's own documentation white paper that I have read in the past. They have explained this, that in their experience when they have gone to their big customers, they have found out that a lot of technology folks would actually say, hey, we should probably move to cloud because we're going to save money. And what AWS says that that's the wrong answer or wrong prediction, and wrong expectation setting for your business stakeholders, especially CFOs and CEOs, because this is not really 100% true, right? So you have to make sure that you do a comparison saying, okay, well, this is what the cost is today, and this is what's going to be cost if you move to AWS. Again, keep in mind about the amortization and the physical cost of the servers that you may have, right? And there is a data in and out cost from the S3 bucket. You want to make sure you do your due diligence on all that aspect. But again, make sure that you also consider non-tangible savings as well, or non-tangible benefits. Like I said, the agility, the quick turnaround time, right? Security, also infrastructure team requirement might minimize as well, right? So ROI that you can realize quickly. So those are the non-tangible things that you can. And also at the start of the webinar, I talked about sometimes we over provision, sometimes we under provision. In this case, if you have over provision, you can simply turn them off. If you have under provision, you can bring them up. There's a concept of auto scaling group ASG, which allows you to bring the servers up on demand automatically. Don't have to do anything, and then you can bring the server down at the low tides, right? So think of those, right? but do not just blindly jump into it and say, okay, well, let's jump into it because it sounds so cool. So these are some options or some ideas that I've given here. Quick turnaround time on hardware provisioning need, no upfront costs. So for any hardware required, so you don't really have to go to CFO and get the budget approved and whatnot. Even though you should probably at least gauge how much it's going to cost. Pay only if I use a service. So I talked about in depth, saying, okay, well, if you are using it, let's say SQS service, that during that message processing time you will be using, that's a cost that you will give. After that, you may not be charged. Don't want to have a big networking team. You may need some good architects, right, in order to make sure that the network is secure. All the right services are being provisioned, and then bringing the servers down. So those are the things that you may want to probably consider, and then those should be handed over to a good networking team, which kind of brings to another point. And that is, when you are actually deciding on cloud or not to cloud, the business stakeholders should be behind you and 100% agreeing in your proposal to move over to the cloud. But also the technology team needs to be brought into the picture as well, and as quickly as possible, because you want to make sure that the folks that are coming on board are competent enough in order to help you when you're running all of these services on the cloud. So the business has to be behind you. The technology team needs to be with you, and they are fully trained and competent. Otherwise, they will be actually creating those services right, left, and then you will be seeing a huge bill at the end of the month. Not a great place to be. After you have decided, yes, we want to move over, then you start looking into the data in and out charges, right? So sometimes when you're actually copying a file to, for example, S3 bucket, that data in may not cost you, but when you're retrieving it back, then it's going to cost you. So it's a little bit tricky in terms of the costing. We may not be used to, if you're coming from a data on data centers perspective, or on-premise perspective, then when you're going into cloud, they charge you differently. Think of serverless architecture, right? This kind of ties back to the SOA architecture, service-oriented architecture I was mentioning earlier, along with the SQS. So the concept that I talked about just a few minutes back, where you have a QA environment, right? And then you want to make sure that you shut down your QA environment when it's not being used automatically, right? You don't have to, because there are certain rules that you can put in your ASG, auto scaling group, and then you say, hey, if the traffic is, or the CPU usage is below X%, and the memory consumption is below X%, then make sure you basically pause the machines, right? So that's one way of saving costs. The other way, which I really like, is the serverless architecture. I'm sure you guys probably have heard a lot about serverless architecture. Do look into that if you haven't. But what this allows you beautifully, just bring up the service when you need them. When you're not, when you're done with them, you basically don't, it automatically shuts down. For example, if you go to AWS, they have a concept of Lambda functions, right? So Lambda functions, and I use that heavily here at Cloud Institute. So if a customer, business customer, wants to retrieve a report from our platform, right, from our database, I really don't need to have a reporting machine box, reporting server. Database, for sure you need it. But if you have 10, 12, 15 reports, right, then you don't really need to have a reporting server, which basically just sits there idle until a business user says, hey, run me this report. Instead, alternatively, what you can do is use Lambda function, again, the concept of serverless architecture, and which allows you to run the report on demand, meaning that the customer from the front end says, I want this report, click on the button, it goes back into the Lambda function, a serverless architecture. That Lambda function comes to live, says, okay, what do you need? It says, okay, I need the report from this date to this date. It goes to the database, process it, because all it's part of the Lambda function code, connects to the database, grabs the data, forms the data in the right format, tabular format, whatever you have, and then send it back to the client. What did you save? You saved tons of money. Why? Because you have to pay only the time the Lambda function was live, and then at that time the data is being processed and sent back to the client, and after it's done, the Lambda function goes away. You just pay X dollars or cents or whatever it is. So do look into that. But again, when you are deciding on whether to go cloud or not to go cloud, this would play a huge role, right, when it comes to costing, right? And these Lambda function can be developed in a variety of languages. If you're coming from a Java background, Python, PHP, whatever it is, they allow you that. It's a really cool feature. We won't be able to cover all of that stuff, obviously, in this webinar, but you should take a look at it. Do look into a calculator, right? And again, this will help you in making the right decision on whether to go to cloud or not go to cloud. You look at all your amortization cost from on-premise, and then you start putting them into the calculator. You basically shuffle some numbers here and there, whatnot, and then you basically come back with the bottom line, right? So you want to make sure before you make a decision, you use the calculator and you do all of this, what has been mentioned over here, especially look into the cloud serverless architecture, regardless which cloud you're going with. Okay, so the common services, I have kind of walked through some of them along the way. But just at a high level, these are the common services, very commonly used, right? And of course, if you go to AWS especially, you will see many, many more services that are available that are not mentioned over here. This is just a tip of the iceberg, right? But again, there are many services that are coming every month from AWS. That they do have a reInvent that they conduct every year, and that's when they launch new services, cool new services that you can use and utilize. Starting from the top, compute service. Compute is all about EC2 instances, right? So right now, we are so used to it. For example, a laptop, and then within laptop, some of you folks may all probably have a Windows partition and a Mac partition if you really need, and but it would be nice to actually just have it hosted on some of these services as well. So what you can do is you can have a terminal, so to speak, within your laptop, and then you can connect to those EC2 boxes, which will probably host your Windows machine if you want to occasionally use Windows, or maybe other environment that you Linux box or whatever, right? So you can start connecting to those compute boxes. These are all virtualized, right? And now compute does have different flavors, right? Again, cost depends on your need. They do have dedicated services on compute, which means that the box would be totally dedicated. There might be a rack even. So you can say, hey, I want to, because of my compliance and security, like for example, banks and many other secure financial institutes, right? They may say, okay, you know what? I don't want to coexist my data or my even virtual machine within the same rack, right? So what you do is you can have they call it a partition environment. So this way you can probably have your own infrastructure at the AWS. So the whole rack would be yours, right? They came up with recently with the AWS posts as well. And AWS Post allows you to actually bring the whole AWS services to your on-prem as well, if for the compute purposes. Meaning that you basically, if you have, that becomes a hybrid model, meaning that you have your data center, and right in the data center, AWS can provide a post, and then they can actually say, okay, you can connect to these services, and that physical machine or ESXi, they all sit on your data center, and then that connects to the AWS services. Very cool concept, something fairly new that they have come up with. Within compute, you like I said earlier, you do have different flavors of EC2 instances, T2, Micro, M series machines with different GPC, meaning that you can have different SSD drive. You can have different memory. So all that fun stuff is there for you to select. Storage, S3 bucket is very common, right? And you must have heard of it now. So S3 has a different flavors. S3 has as the standard storage. It has the Glacier storage. It has the intelligent tier storage, right? So these are infrequent access storage. So it allows you to figure out, okay, what is your need? So for example, if you want to store some files, right, immediately on S3, but after 30 days, these files are no longer needed, but you still want to keep them from the compliance perspective. So that becomes a business use case, right? So what you do is you basically keep them available either on infrequent access or standard S3 storage, right? Once that time period of 30 days has expired or lapsed, you can define a life cycle within that S3 bucket, saying from after 30 days on the 31st day, move these set of files or this file from S3 storage, standard or infrequent access or intelligent tier access, to a what we call a glacier. Okay. And the cost between Glacier and the S3 storage is significantly different. So what this allows you is it's just like putting that file in a vault and saying, okay, well, just keep it for the next 4 years, 3 years, whatever the need is. I'm not needing it immediately, but if I need it because of the compliance perspective, I can retrieve it back. There is a turnaround time on the Glacier. Sometimes it takes a few hours to actually get that file stored back. So that's a downside, but at least from the cost perspective, you are really saving significant amount of money. Now, AWS has recently launched a deep archive as well. So if you want to store it in a longer period of time, then there is also deep archive, deep Glacier, which basically allows you to store for a longer period of time. And there is a retrieval fees, and of course there's storage fees, but those are very minimal. So look into these storage classes. There are different storage classes. The other thing on the storage class is the life cycle, right? So do look into the life cycle. So just the use case scenario that I just talked about, where you want to keep it in 30 days and migrate over to a different area, that's part of the life cycle, right? Or if you want to make them unavailable, then it allows you through the life cycle. Databases, they do have a managed database service available in different flavor forms. MySQL, MS SQL, Postgres, MS SQL, they're all available. Look into, if you're a MySQL user, then look into MariaDB, right? So that's a really powerful, and then they have actually up the InnoDB or MySM database. I can't remember, one of the two. These databases, some of them would have a capability of having a read-only slave databases. So meaning that you may want to probably, in the earlier example I was giving, so if you want to run reports, you don't want to run reports in a good architecture from your main production database. What do? You just have some replica associated with the master, and then the master basically pushes the data to the replica databases, and replica becomes your reporting servers, and then you can actually use them for any and all the report that you need. In case of a failure, then you can bump one of the slave database to become a master, and the other slave becomes their slaves. So basically, that whole concept of master-slave database exists. You may want to probably look into different managed database services. Backups are frequently happening. You don't have to back up your databases. And in case if there is a failure, then you do have other database instances that are available. Also, sometimes from the compliance perspective, you may want to probably host a read-only database somewhere in a specific region and may not give access. So that allows the AWS services allows you to do that exact same thing. Networking and content delivery. So within networking, AWS has what we call it VPC, right? So VPC, and I'll show you that in a diagram shortly. Networking has a subnet concept as well, and the security group access control list. So all of that makes it a network, a good network topology that you can implement within AWS. How secure your network is, it depends on the competent resource that you have on board, who knows, which ports to open, which security rule to open, which security rule to stop. So you may want to probably study the security groups, the access control list, ACLs, in order to make sure your infrastructure is safe and secure. Within networking, you can also look into how to scale your network, right? So meaning that if a load comes in, can I actually easily increase my servers, right? And the virtual servers, EC2 instance and whatnot, and that is all done through the ASG, right? So you may want to probably look into the ASG, which basically allows you to scale your environment on the fly. Content delivery is equal to, if you guys have worked with Cloudflare, for example, right? Akamai is another example. So those, what they do is they host your dynamic, sometimes not 100% dynamic, but most of them are static. But if the data is not changing that much, it's still yet is dynamic, then you can still host it on some of these content delivery networks. So like I'll give an example. Akamai is one, and then Cloudflare is another one. What AWS does, AWS provide that content delivery on the cloud front side of it. So an example would be, let's say if you have a web page which has a lot of images in them, and those images don't change that much, right? So what you do is you basically push those images from your source origin, it could be EC2 instance or S3 bucket, push them over to the CloudFront content delivery, and they get replicated over there. And anytime, and then you define, this is a TTL, for example, time to expire or live. That is like 3 months or 2 months or whatever, or upon a new date update on the origin server, then it basically goes and grabs it from your server. So the advantage of coming out of this is basically your pages are served much faster. If you have a static website, you can easily just host that, and then your website will be much faster. Any other content that is static, is not changing, you can easily host them on your CloudFront. Migration. So if you are on premise and then you want to migrate over, there are many migration tools. For example, you do have database migration service, DMS. You have a SCT, schema a conversion tool, which basically allows you to easily migrate your environment from your on-premise to the AWS. SCT and DMS are just an easy one. If you have more, like for example, if you have virtual machines that needs to be migrated over, they can easily be migrated over through the other tools that AWS offers. There are good handful management tools. Where basically you can come, I think the one is called Control Tower, if I'm not mistaken. That's a fairly recent tool that has actually come out, where you can actually look at everything as a name dictates, Control Tower. You can actually see what are the services that are being employed, and then you can actually also, it's called I think managed services. You can actually take the services and deploy it on other accounts that you may have with an AWS environment. Security, identity, and compliance. IAM is a service which basically AWS allows you to create user groups, allows permissions to a user for a specific task. In messaging, I've talked about the SQS. Okay, I'm just checking the time, so we still got about 10 to 15 minutes. This is a quick overview of how to access different services. For example, if you want to access a compute service, an EC2 instance, then you would create an EC2 instance and launch it. You can also access that EC2 instance via SSH if you want to upload files manually, or via RDP if you're using a Windows machine. Storage, you can create a bucket, upload files, and then assign the permission, and also the life cycle that I just talked about earlier. Databases, if it's a managed database, RDS, so this basically allows you to very quickly, just go in, click a few buttons, and then you got your database up and running. And then all of that backups and then security features and the engine, InnoDB, or configuring and fine tuning, that's all done for you. The replica can be created. The availability zone is already there, which means that if one fails, like I said, the other replica would be available. You can also pick and choose how many replicas you want. So this is really, really powerful. And now you can probably see, if you guys have already gone through these AWS environments or other vendors, that the job of getting the environment up and running is really, really minimal, right? And then you can imagine that the team would be very required when it comes to managing these services would be very minimal as well. Networking content delivery, we've talked about it, allowing the VPC, allowing the security groups rule, access control list, ACL, CloudFront distribution, I talked about, are the caching mechanism that you may employ. This is a quick architecture. Again, I just took a sample of it, right? So if you look at it, then right here, this is the whole AWS environment. Route 53 that allows you to host your your DNS. So if you have www.example.com, so you would host your DNS name on the Route 53. So Route 53 can become your GoDaddy, so to speak. You don't really need to go out and then actually host it on GoDaddy. You can come to Route 53. You can define your internal hosted zones as well. So you don't have to go outside. So if you want to host something within your network, you can do that as well. You can get a certificate here from Route 53 and deploy those certificate on Route 53 as well. So any traffic that is coming in and want to access your environment, if you have Route 53, you can just come through Route 53. And again, that's an option. If you don't want to use Route 53, you can still come through the other services like GoDaddy, and then the GoDaddy would have a record and whatnot, and that would actually be accessing your environment. The other thing is that, ELB, the elastic load balancer, very, very critical. If you are running in a production environment, you want to make sure your load is balanced properly, and also it covers the failover. So in case if your one environment goes down, then you still have the other environment up and running. So any traffic coming in from Route 53 or GoDaddy, it would actually just be handed over to ELB, and then ELB would have some rules. It could be actually weightage rule. Again, I wish I could show you more, but you need to probably spend almost a day in order to understand the ELB, because ELB has different flavors of rules. You can say, okay, region based, you can say compliance based, you can say on the weighted side, you can even have round robin. So these are all the rules that you can define at the ELB level, which means the traffic would be routed to different environment based on your setting at the ELB level. ELB can also be used for your A/B testing, meaning that, let's say if this environment is not ready and you just deployed a new production environment. So what you do, you set your traffic to 0 here, meaning no traffic would be sent until you're 100% sure that everything is ready. Until then, you can set this one as 100, and then all the traffic would be going to a different environment. So for those A/B testing, you can use ELB to route the traffic. This is the storage tier. So in the storage tier, again, we talked about S3. So you can have S3 bucket, you can have MS SQL, MySQL, MariaDB, or you can have Postgres, whatever. So this tier is actually at the bottom. Now, this would be ideally in a separate subnet, which means that you have a VPC, and within VPC, you have a private subnet. So nobody can access your databases from outside. Only allowed application are actually talking to these databases. One other thing you may want to probably notice here is that AZ. So again, I think you probably understand the concept of region. So there is the region, right? So within the region, you would have availability zones, right? So those availability zones make sure that you can, if one goes down, then within that region, you have another availability zone, which is basically hosting the similar application, similar EC2 instance on the second availability zone. So if one goes down, then you have the backup on the other. Otherwise, you'll be dead in water if you actually don't have replicated your environment across different availability zone. Again, it depends on the business need, not necessarily needed immediately right out the get-go. But in case the business grows and future need requires, then you can have those availability zones spread out, and even within the regions as well. That covers a different topic, guys, and that is business continuity and disaster recovery, so BC&DR, where you want to make sure that, and there are different architectures for that as well. You may say, okay, if this whole region goes down, possible, right, can happen, then my other region should be up and running. So this could be on a standby, right, with a lower hardware, right? So for example, if you have a EC2 instance which with M5 or extra large or whatever here on one region, then the other region may have probably a medium size M5 or whatnot. So this way the cost is not really duplicated. Big companies, but with big budgets and with the very little downtime, they would tend to have these regions disaster recovery across different regions. With mid-size or small companies where budget is limited, then you may want to probably just rely on the availability zone as indicated over here. We have a cloud alarm, CloudWatch alarm, which basically, in case if something goes down, you can trigger off alarm and send an SMS, text message through the SNS, which is a simple notification service within Microsoft, within Amazon AWS. And of course, there are similar services within Azure and the other cloud providers, where you as a network or architect can receive the notification right on your phone as an SMS text messaging. And then there's a IAM tier that I will actually walk you through. I think, let me switch over now to, okay, I'm gonna share a screen, and let me just log in first, Peter, and then you can just go ahead and allow me to share my screen.
Yep, sounds good. I'll bring that up once I see it there. And again, we're just about getting close to time. I know we're just going to show a little bit of that, but we do have a couple questions. But any others, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat on LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever you're watching, and we'll queue those up as well at the end here. Let me know when you. There we go. I see it. I will. Are you ready to go there? Hey, it's us.
All right. Okay. Can you see my screen?
We see the console home. Yeah.
Console home. Perfect. Thank you. All right, guys. So one thing, as soon as you log in, right, then one thing kind of quickly jump at you is basically cost and usage. Remember, I was talking about that AWS allows you to quickly look at the cost that you have incurred so far. It gives you a prediction and forecast of the cost at the end of the month as well. So here it is. This widget allows you to see what the current cost is, the forecast cost, right, and what was the last month cost. Within AWS, I think it's under here. So if you go billing dashboard under the account, you will see billing dashboard. So if you go to the billing dashboard, you can see everything that you need to know about your bill. So here are the bills, right? And the other cool thing about it is that you can see that Elastic Cloud Computing in this region, how much did it cost, right? So it cost me $690, right? So it even goes, at the granular level and explain to you the $64 is basically from these services, right? So if you want to actually cut down on something, you can actually cut down on the cost. One thing that I forgot to mention is that you can have tagging in the within every service that you up and get it up and running. So you can again, we don't really use it, but it is recommended to use it in case if you want to grow your business, and then you have a budgeted departmental heads where basically saying, okay, this is the budget for this department, this department, this department, and then anytime you bring up a service for a department, then you can just associate the tag with that service. So when you're actually looking at it at the cost level, then you can see how much did this department cost at the end of the month. So take a look at it in the billing, explore that. All the services can be searched from the top, right? So for example, if I type in EC2, I can see EC2 right here. If I click on it, you can see everything and anything about the EC2 instances, right? So if you want to just play with it and you want to launch an instance, you can click on this launch instance. If there are instances that are already running, like for example, in my case, I have instance that is running, you can click on that instance and you can see information about that instance. So this is the name of the instance, the instance ID, instance state, and some other details like a private IP and public IP. If I click on it, then you will see more details around at the bottom. Tabs, the details tab have the instance ID, public IP, again, a lot of other details. It also has the VPC, the virtual private cloud, which basically talks about in which network that you have actually hosted this this EC2 instance, subnet, and also the one thing that I want to show you here. So it's going to be probably under security. So this is the security, meaning that what are the security groups rules that you have set for this machine, right? So let me just quickly launch an instance first and then maybe give you a quick idea of. So once you click on launch instance, so you can have a name here. Remember I said that you can pick it and choose the different machines. So here's the machines AMIs and their browse more AMI. It will basically take you to the page where you have the listing of all the machines. Right now I'm using a free tier, but if you don't want to use the free tier, then here's the list of all the other that you can use, right? So depending on your need, right? So if you're doing some AI based work on your machine, then you would probably use some of the other deep learning machines. But if you're just for demoing purposes, if I'm using it, then I can use the free tier T2 micro machine. Then here is the free tier T2. Now, if you notice right here, it says family T2, one virtual machine, 2 GB of memory. So this is what I get. I can pick and choose within from the free tier. But this list, as you can see, is a pretty long list, right? So it has variety of machine with different configuration, R7i large. You may want to probably find out what your need is, and then actually look at the cost as well, how much it is per hour, and then do the math. Let's not select that. Okay, quickly, I'm going to launch. I'm running out of time, I guess. You can click on proceed without key pair. Key pair are used when you want to actually connect through the SSH. So when you're connecting through the SSH, then you need a key pair in order to connect to this machine. So here it is. It's successfully initiated. Let's click on it. Here's the demo. So it's pending. You can continue, do refresh right from the top. You can click on it, see more details. And once it's ready, it's going to show us that it is in the ready state. Okay, here we go. So this machine is ready now. You can connect to this machine directly from the console right here, or like I said, you can have it connected from the SSH. So let me just go ahead and click connect. Establishing connection. Here we go. So this is the machine installed. Now, if you want to access it from the front end real quick, right, what you need to do is you need to install maybe HTTP daemon here. This is a Linux box, so that's why I'm going to go ahead and install this. Okay. All right, so this is installed, and let me just go ahead and maybe start this service. Okay. So that is installed. All right, so let me just quickly try to access this machine from here. Sorry. Okay, let me just turn that off. Okay. All right, so this has been installed. Let me go and try to connect from the front end. The way you would need to connect from the front end is you need the public IP. See right here, it says public IP. This private IP is something that you cannot access the machine from. So click on that. Right now, it's not going to go anywhere. The reason is, and again, this is a whole other topic, right? So it's not going to connect because you need to set up the security groups that I was talking about earlier. So you need to go into security. You need to go into the wizard or the security group policy, inbound rules, edit inbound rules, add a rule, and then you can say, okay, I want to allow all of HTTP traffic and from any IP4 address. There we go. So you notice it just came back up. It says it works. Okay, now if I remove that, then it's not going to work. So if I remove this HTTP, delete, save, load it again, it's going to continue to spin until it says I can't. All right, so I got, I think, maybe 3 or 4 more minutes. Quickly jumping over to S3 bucket real quick, and then maybe in a minute I want to show you that. So if you go to the S3 bucket, this is where you would actually create your bucket. So if you click on create bucket, you provide your name, the region. Remember, I talked about it that, if you want to keep a bucket in a region and not expose it anywhere, then you can define the bucket in that region. From compliance perspective, you block all public access. Bucket versioning, so you can disable it, meaning that anytime somebody uploads a new version, it's gonna override. If you enable it, then that bucket is gonna probably cost you a lot more. Tag, I talked about it, where you can actually add a tag if you want to do a cost based on the departmental, and then you just click on create bucket, and the lifecycle is also present within the bucket. You may want to probably try playing with this. I think it's just giving you a high level idea, but I think the best way to learn is when you dive in. One other quick thing is IAM. Without this, I think this is the foundation, right? So this IAM identity access management is where you actually create users, user groups, rules, and roles and policies. So if you want to create a user, you just go into IAM like I did, and then you go click create user right here, and you provide the name and then click the user, right? And just go demo user, for example. And you can you can put that user in this group because this group is already created. And you can also define permission policies, but let's just leave that as is. Create user, so that user get created, right? You can also add more permission to this user. For example, if I give full access on the Redshift, so I can select this permission and then say, okay, add permission, and then save. Oops. I may have it probably. Okay, so inline policy is basically allowing you to create a JSON for any other instance. Again, this is an advanced topic, but if you want to give a user with the permissions based on using your own JSON file format, you can say, okay, allow what action do you want to give the user and the resources that you are allowing the users. That's again, a very deep topic on IAM users. I think that's it. So I want to cover these three major things. Otherwise, you can just search all the other topics. For example, if you want to use control tower, I would talk about that. That's a cool thing to know, which basically allows you to see everything on your dashboard. Michael, Peter, that's it from my side. If you have any questions on the chat, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, I think I've just got a couple here, so we'll try to do them real quick because I know we're a little over time. Someone asked, let me bring it up here as well. What was it that led you to use AWS over other platforms?
When we first migrated over to cloud, AWS had more services, and this is about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. If we compared with Azure, and the availability zones, AZs, and the regions were far more as compared to the other. GCP was way behind. Azure was next in line, but AWS was way ahead. So that basically made us to migrate over to AWS. That was one reason. The other reason, personally, when I was doing evaluation, I found AWS's dashboards from billing perspective and the other UI UX was much better at that time. I'm not talking now, right? I'm talking about 3-4 years ago. Was way ahead of Azure, and I can say that at any given day. So those were the primary two good reasons that led me to decide on AWS.
Makes sense. And then the other one we have here is how do you compare the value of certifications versus real world experience as someone that's kind of gone both ways?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, right? Even though I worked on AWS for the first couple of years, and I felt that it's really important to get the certification for two reasons. Number one, technology is, I draw the analogy of technologists of today's time as as a someone in the medicine world, right? Because you have to stay on top of the diseases and the vaccinations and the medications and whatnot, right? Technology, and in one of the book that I read, "What Got You Here Will Not Get You There," by Goldsmith. I forgot the first name. It's really a good book. If you can spend some time reading that, it talks about that. You have to make sure you stay on top of your area, right? If you're a technologist, you want to make sure you study everything, and in order to study, you want to make sure that you get as many certification as you can get, because having the work experience is absolutely utmost important, but bundling it with the certification is basically just proving your work experience as well. Not really everywhere it's true, but I think if somebody is trying to get into a new job, or trying to get the resume highlighted, then these two would come really handy. Not just experience would, maybe, but again, it depends on the situation, right? So if you have certification and the right experience combined, then your resume will probably shine.
Makes sense. Just had one more pop in, so we'll go ahead and get to it. Murali asks, would you like to know, or he would like to know more about multi-cloud adoption to achieve maximum resiliency and availability? And honestly, that could maybe be its own, it's completely separate webinar, but is there anything you want to touch on that?
Well, see, the thing is that, even with the AWS, if you're just having a singular a cloud environment, just having that competencies, because remember, at the start of the webinar, I said that you have your business backing, you have to have the right competent resources as well. So, and with the AWS, if you take any cloud provider, right, and now the resiliency, the availability zone, the regions, they are available, and they are almost not 4 nines, if not 11 nines, but at least 4 nines available, right? So do you really want to actually have more staff in terms of training on the other environments and making sure that you have that connectivity and whatnot? That brings up lots more challenges when it comes to the multi-vendor hosting of the same application. Only if there is a need. We did, in one particular instance, we had to host some of the Microsoft courses, programs, and the requirement was obviously we have to host it on just Azure. So we created a connection between our AWS and Azure's using the Active Directory ADFS forest services. But other than that, I personally think it becomes a nightmare in order to do the maintenance. Again, if there's a compliance reasons, then you may have to. Otherwise, I personally, as a CTO, I would rather just have one environment with the lots of more competent resources behind me who can back me up. And lastly, resiliency is already there with any cloud provider you pick and choose. So what else do you need in order to get the resiliency? That's my take again.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. There's, it's big news these days if something actually does go down, and it's usually just one region or something like that.
Yeah.
So is it worth it? Thank you so much, everybody, for your questions. If there are any that come in after the fact, we'll try to answer those still on LinkedIn. I did want to let you know before we let you leave, or you can leave whenever you want, but we did have an AWS certification bootcamp that is a great place to get started. It prepares you for the 3 most in-demand AWS certs, which are Cloud Practitioner, Solutions Architect Associate, and Solutions Architect Professional. It also includes 2 hours of personalized coaching with an AWS expert, self-paced courses, demos, and hands-on labs. I'm going to drop that link in the chat right now, so you can take a look at that. Or if you're not quite sure where to start, we strongly advise getting advice from a personal cloud coach. So if you subscribe to our monthly or annual coaching, you also get access to our full library of training and labs. Coaching starts at just $64 a month, so it's a great way to go if you want to just talk to someone and get some ideas and comments there. So I think that about wraps it up. FK, thank you so much. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
Well, like I said, we have to stay on top of technology, right? And things change so rapidly within the technology realm. Whatever provider you choose, right? You want to make sure you comprehend all those services and understand, and the architecture, because I'm a solution architect myself. So having the right resource and understanding of the services that they offer, regardless of the vendor, is critical in order for to be successfully hosted on the cloud. Otherwise, the business would come after you and saying, okay, what happened? Why the bill is so high, or the security issues? Well, somebody just breached your security. So that understanding, that learning, regardless whatever it is, you have to have that learning and right people.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. And Murali, I saw your comment just now asking about security in AWS courses. I'll send you a link to some of those, and you can take a look because we do have those as well. But thank you again, FK. Thank you all of you for watching. I know we had people in Mumbai, we had people in Nigeria, South Africa, so all over the world, and we appreciate you taking the time. I know it's late in a lot of those places, and appreciate you staying and learning with us. And thank you, FK.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, and good luck. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Bye.